we must make the best of those things that are in our power and take the rest as nature gives it, which, from my understanding, is control what we can and work within what we can't, which, as you've just said, control what we can is our understanding, the wisdom that we've equipped ourselves with, the work that we've done to practice that and create virtue within it. We can understand other people's plight, situation through sympathy, but if we actually adopt empathy, that's us trying to place ourselves in something that we actually can't control, and it's a bit more
Right.
hypothetical. So,
Right.
with that in mind, reading that quote out again, we must make the best of those things that are in our power and take the rest as nature gives it. Which elements of virtue are in our control and which are not? Because you are the modern day moderator for the studies. You have written about this from your perspective. What can we control and what can't we control when it comes to virtue?
So the basic idea that the Stoics have is that pretty much the only thing that it's under our control, the only thing that, as Epictetus puts it, is up to us, that is we're responsible for, is our considered judgments. That's it. There's nothing else. Uh, I mean, those judgments take different forms and different. Epictetus uses different words to refer to them, because these judgments include, an assessment of a situation, a decision to act or not to act, prioritizing certain values, over others. So all of those, however, are judgments. They're all situations where you think about you're faced with a particular situation, you think about it and you say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, or this is not what I'm going to do. And what is up to us is the judgment itself. What is not up to us, crucially, is the outcome of our actions, right? So, for instance, I can arrive at the correct judgment that I ought to be taking care of my body, which means I decide to go to the gym on a regular basis, to eat healthy, to drink less, that sort of stuff. Those decisions are up to me. Okay, they're entirely up to me, meaning that nobody else can do them. Nobody else can actually arrive at that decision on my behalf. It is up to me in the sense that I'm responsible for them. However, will those decisions, in fact, lead to a healthy body and a longer life? Well, that depends. It depends on external circumstances, which are definitely not up to me. I can do everything right and yet being hit by, a car the next time that I cross the street, or being affected by a terminal disease that is nothing to do with my lifestyle, or and so on and so forth, right? So I am responsible and in charge of my decisions, which stem from judgments, but I am not responsible for the outcomes. And so what Epictetus is saying, what he calls actually the fundamental rule of life, which tells you that he thinks this is very important, is that we should always keep in mind this distinction between what is up to us and what is not up to us. And that the right attitude is to focus our efforts on what is up to us, because that's where our agency actually lies. This is what we can do, and then develop an attitude of acceptance and equanimity toward the things that are not up to us. Right? So, and this goes not just for the big things in life, but for the minor ones. For instance, before we started this conversation, I told you that I was actually in Edinburgh very recently. And, at some point, with my daughter, I was visiting with my daughter. So at some point, of course, we had to get back to the airport and, in time for our flight. Now, we knew when the flight was. We had an estimate of how long it would take to get to the airport, and we knew that we had to go through security and all that sort of stuff. So our judgment was, all right, we're leaving 3 hours earlier, so that we have plenty of time. That judgment turned out to be correct in that case, because there was no incident, no accident in between. There was nothing that happened that precluded us from getting to the airport with plenty of time when we got on the plane. But it could have. We could have taken a car, and there might have been an accident, or the road might have been closed, and whatever we would not have gotten to the airport in time. So, in those kind of situations, you remind yourself, well, what was up to me here was to make a reasonable decision about when to leave for the airport, which I did. So I have nothing to blame myself for. But if it turns out that I can't get to the airport in time because there is an accident on the road, then I just have to accept, because it's not up to me. That thing is not up to me. I have to accept that I'm going to miss the plane, and not get upset about it, because it's like, why would I get upset? It's like, okay, I did everything that I could. and it still didn't work out. So, I need to start focusing on the next step, which is, well, when is the next flight leaving, and can I book it, or what is the worst thing that might happen? Maybe I'll have to come back to the town and spend one extra night in Edinburgh. Well, that's not a worst thing that could possibly,
I think
it's not a big deal.
exactly. I think to put a positive spin on it, you've done exactly that. But I think in terms of, it's a very important point, even though it's such a simple one and such a real life example, is that if we devote resources emotionally to, oh, if I'd left an hour earlier, if I'd done this, if I'd done that, you are using resources that could otherwise be devoted to finding a solution and therefore getting back to some sort of baseline emotion. So for me, the big thing for me that's allowed me to calibrate this over the years, and sort of regular listeners will know this, is that ultra endurance events in general will present me with things that go wrong. And as you're tired, you're fatigued, you're 40 hours deep or whatever it might be, and your immediate emotional snap to something makes you feel a certain way, bringing yourself back to some sort of practical, right, how do I take the next step forward rather than what could I have done 30 steps back, is a great way to actually just keep moving forward. That's all we're really doing on a day-to-day basis, isn't it? We're enjoying the process in a different way, but we're just trying to find a way to keep moving forward. So going back to what we were saying before, it's the exact same as virtue, whereby I have the wisdom and the knowledge to know, right, if there is a car crash that's preventing me from getting to the airport, then, okay, I know that there's nothing I could have done about that. And then doing the work over time is constantly wrestling with yourself internally to be able to just think practically about what needs to be done next, rather than what if, what could have been, and all that stuff. So I think that's a really, whilst it's such a classic example that we've all lived through in some capacity, I'm sure it's a very, very digestible example for people to take home and try and think about, right, next time you're presented with something that you actually could not have controlled, if your judgment was correct within the parameters that you had available to you, find a solution rather than focus on the emotion. And that's a very Stoic focused teaching, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And when I present examples like that, well, people and I point out, for instance, that essentially, as you were implying, that regret is not something that the Stoics indulge in, because regret is about trying to change things in the past, and the past is definitely not up to you to change. So it's like, why would you want to wallow in regret? The only thing you're doing is injuring yourself at an emotional level. Now, when I have these conversations, people would say, well, but I can't help it. I just feel that way. I just feel that I experience that emotion. And that is simply not true. Of course you can help it. There's very good empirical, it's not just the Stoics that tell us so. There's very good empirical evidence from modern science, from cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance, that of course you can change your emotions. Not in a snap, by snapping your fingers. That's not true. It does require exercise. It does require mindfulness. But for instance, in the case that we're talking, just to stick with that example for a second, let's say that in fact an accident then happened and we had missed the plane, right? Yes, I understand that it might come natural for somebody to say, "Oh, damn it," and focus on the negative part, on the part that you cannot change anymore. What you do in that point, you take a breath or two or three, if needed, and then you gently nudge your mind back to focus on what needs to be done, as opposed to thinking back to what has happened. Yes, your mind will, especially early on when you're not trained, will go back to the regret. And then you nudge it back again toward the task at hand. And once you do that, and the important thing is that you need to do this mindfully, meaning paying attention to what you're doing. Epictetus uses the word prosoke, which literally means paying attention, right? So just refocus, redirect your focus to what needs to be done, and gently. Because if one thing that doesn't work is if you sort of more or less violently want to just get a thought out of your way, then that's the sure way to get your thought back immediately, because your mind will go there insistently. But you can do that. This is something that can definitely be done. Yes, it will require practice. We won't work initially very, very well, but the more you do it, the more it does work. I've been practicing this sort of mindfully going back to the task at hand, as opposed to indulging in regret. And initially it was difficult, But now, every time that something happens, that a potential setback occurs, my immediate first automatic thought is, okay, what is up to me here? And then I start focusing on that part. And it immediately makes you feel better. Because one of the things that causes anxiety and regret is precisely the fact that you feel like you don't have power over the situation. You're powerless. Powerlessness is something that human beings don't really like. And so focusing on what you can do in a given situation, however little it may be, is crucial because you regain control of your actions, you regain control of your emotional responses, and you actually face the setback in a more productive, constructive fashion.